Emily Carter began to understand that a marriage could be destroyed not by someone standing outside the door and knocking again and again, but by the person inside quietly unlocking it and letting the poison walk in. On an October Sunday evening in the suffocatingly perfect dining room of her mother-in-law, Patricia Carter, in a quiet suburb south of Charlotte, North Carolina. Outside, night had already fallen, the maple trees lining the street turning deep red and burnt orange beneath the streetlights. While in Patricia's front yard, 2 pots of yellow chrysanthemums sat on either side of the porch steps, as if measured with a ruler, not a single leaf out of place. Not one branch allowed to lean beyond its prop or shape. To strangers, that house always looked warm. A wine-red front door, a fall wreath hanging neatly in the center, white curtains behind the windows, golden light spilling from the living room. The smell of roast chicken and rosemary drifting all the way into the hallway whenever someone opened the door. But to Emily, throughout her 9 years of marriage to Ryan Carter, that house had never been a warm place. It was a courtroom dressed in a beautiful tablecloth, where every accusation was spoken in a gentle voice, every cut wrapped in the gift paper of family tradition, and every reaction from her could be turned into proof that she did not know how to belong. That evening, Patricia's long dining table was covered in a white cloth, a vase of dried orange-brown flowers placed in the center, blue-rimmed porcelain plates arranged at precise distances, wineglasses glowing beneath the chandelier, mashed potatoes whipped so smooth there was not a single lump, salad sprinkled with walnuts, garlic, butter, bread tucked into a cloth-lined basket. And on the wall behind Patricia hung a row of Carter family photographs, arranged like a declaration of ownership. Ryan at 6 years old holding a baseball glove. Ryan at his high school graduation, his mother standing beside him and straightening his tie. Ryan on his first day at work, Patricia hugging him as though she herself had delivered him there. Ryan and Emily in their wedding photo, except Patricia stood pressed close to Ryan, her hand resting on his arm, her eyes not on the bride but on her son, as if Emily were only a temporary woman allowed to step into a story where the main character had already been chosen. Emily sat to Ryan's right, her back straight, though both hands hidden beneath the table were clasped tightly together. She was 36, working in human resources for an insurance company, the kind of woman people often called pleasant before they truly knew her, because she knew how to listen, how not to make anyone uncomfortable, how to smile at the right moment, how to ask questions that made others feel cared for. Those qualities had once made her well-liked. In the Carter family, they became the very things Patricia used to demand more from her. Because Emily was kind, she was expected to endure. Because Emily was patient, she was expected to understand. Because Emily disliked conflict, everyone assumed she would be the one to swallow the hard parts so dinner could continue. Patricia sat at the head of the table like a Southern family queen, her light brown hair touched with gray and styled neatly, a cream cashmere sweater over her shoulders, a small strand of pearls at her throat, a gold bracelet at her wrist that Ryan had given her for her 60th birthday. She knew how to become the perfect woman in other people's eyes. Attentive, slightly funny, remembering the names of the neighbors' children, always asking after the health of the elderly, always sending thank you cards after parties, always saying, "Bless your heart," in a voice that could be sympathy or contempt depending on whether the listener had lived with her long enough to know the difference. She poured gravy over Ryan's chicken before passing him the plate, even though he was 38 years old, married, had his own home, and was entirely capable of serving himself. Emily saw the gesture, as she had seen hundreds of other small gestures, and forced herself not to react. If she reacted, Ryan would say she noticed too much. If she stayed silent, another small part of her would be pushed further away from the place of wife. The remark came after Patricia asked Emily about work, asking in the kind of voice that made the question feel more like a test than concern. Emily had just said the company had been going through some staffing changes lately. She had been busy, and perhaps this year she and Ryan would need to divide Thanksgiving between both sides of the family, because her mother wanted to see her too. Patricia was spooning more mashed potatoes onto her sister's plate when she paused for half a beat, her smile not disappearing, only thinning. "Emily tries her best," she said, loud enough for the whole table to hear. "Some women just aren't raised to understand family the way we do." The room did not fall silent immediately. That was what Emily would remember most. For half a second, people kept chewing, kept setting their glasses down, kept moving knives and forks, as if the sentence needed time to enter the air and let everyone realize it had struck someone. Then the sounds faded. Patricia's sister glanced at Emily, then down at her plate. Ryan's cousin lifted his wineglass to his mouth, though he clearly did not drink. Patricia's close friend, Helen, smiled awkwardly. The kind of smile worn by someone who did not want to choose a side, but also did not want to lose her seat at the table. Emily felt her face burn, but her back and hands went cold. She had heard other versions of that sentence for years. Emily isn't used to big families. Emily likes things her way. Emily is very independent, which can be wonderful, but marriage does soften a woman. Emily's mother raised her differently. Every line had a soft layer of cotton wrapped around it, so that if she cried out in pain, she would look like someone biting into a pillow and accusing the pillow of having teeth. She did not look at Patricia. She looked at Ryan. Her husband was cutting his piece of chicken too slowly. His eyes lowered to his plate, his shoulders slightly stiff. For 1 second, then 2, Emily waited for him to do the thing she had been waiting for nearly a decade. To choose the truth over false peace. He did not need to shout. He did not need to embarrass his mother. He only needed to say one clear sentence. "Mom, don't talk about my wife like that." Just that. One sentence that could reset the order of the room, that could tell everyone Emily was not an outsider begging to be admitted into this family. That she was his wife, his family, a person not to be dissected with fake politeness. But Ryan did not say that sentence. He lifted his eyes slightly, not toward Emily but toward his mother, and gave an uncomfortable smile. "Mom, don't start." The room lightened because there had been just enough intervention for everyone to pretend the matter had been handled. But Emily heard the worst part of it clearly. "Don't start," as if Patricia were only being a little difficult, as if the problem was an argument that might happen, not an insult that had already happened, as if Emily were the spark that needed to be managed, while Patricia was a difficult mother who deserved to be soothed. Ryan was not standing beside her. He was standing in his favorite position, the middle, where he could look tired, noble, and innocent. Patricia set the spoon down with a very soft sound. "I'm not starting anything, sweetheart. I'm only saying family takes effort." Sweetheart was for Ryan, not Emily. Patricia always knew where to place the sweet word, so the other person could taste the bitterness. Ryan took a sip of wine, looked toward the window, and said nothing more. Emily felt the room narrowing around her. She wanted to say that she had tried. She had tried in every way a person could try without completely losing herself. She had attended Patricia's church services, even though she had not grown up in that church. She had learned the Carter family pecan pie recipe, even though Patricia always said the crust was almost there. She had allowed Patricia to come over and rearrange the kitchen because Ryan said she just wants to help. She had spent more Thanksgivings with the Carters than with her own mother. She had sent Patricia flowers on Mother's Day, even after phone calls that made her lock herself in the bathroom and cry. She had called Patricia Mom once during the first year of marriage, then stopped when Patricia smiled and said, "Oh, honey, Patricia is fine. I wouldn't want to replace anyone." She had tried until her effort became something no one saw anymore, like the light in the dining room, only noticed when it went out. But if she said any of that, Patricia would widen her eyes. Ryan would sigh, the relatives would feel uncomfortable, and the story afterward would not be that Patricia had insulted Emily. The story would be that Emily had ruined Sunday dinner. So she picked up her water glass, took a sip even though her throat was tight, and let the sound of knives and forks return, each tiny tap against porcelain like the heartbeat of something dying slowly. On the drive home, the car passed through the dark streets of Charlotte, where a few houses had already hung early Halloween lights, plastic pumpkins glowing on porches, tree shadows sliding over the windows like long hands. Emily sat in the passenger seat, her purse in her lap, staring at her own hand. Ryan drove in silence for nearly 10 minutes, and at first that silence still gave her a foolish little hope that he was thinking of how to apologize. She imagined he might say, "My mother was wrong," or at least, "I know that hurt you." One small sentence late but true. Instead, he exhaled like a man who had held his composure too long. "You know how my mother is. Why do you keep letting her get to you?" Emily turned her head to look at him. The streetlights crossed Ryan's face, bright then dark, making his expression seem to change shape over and over. "I let her get to me? I'm not saying she was right. You're also not saying she was wrong." His hands tightened on the steering wheel. "I told her not to start. You said it like the thing to avoid was an awkward scene, not the fact that she humiliated me in front of everyone." Ryan glanced at her very quickly before looking back at the road, his voice carrying that familiar weariness, the weariness that had become a weapon because it made every need of hers look like, oh, any more burdened. What do you want me to do, Emily? Stand up and fight with my mother in the middle of dinner? I want you to tell the truth. You don't need to fight. Just say she isn't allowed to speak about your wife that way. You don't understand. With my mother, if I did that in front of everyone, she would be hurt. Emily laughed very softly, but there was nothing joyful in it. And what about me? Ryan was silent, only for a second, but long enough. You always want me to choose, he said finally. I'm trapped between the two most important women in my life, and you never see how hard that is. She looked out the window and saw her faint reflection in the glass, her eyes dark, her mouth pressed closed. I don't want you to choose between your wife and your mother. I want you to stop using that as a reason to protect no one but yourself. Ryan did not answer. He turned the radio on very low, an old country song filling the space between them. Emily sat beside him and felt lonely in a particularly cruel way. The kind of loneliness that only exists when the person making you lonely is sitting right next to you, breathing the same air, wearing the same wedding ring, and still able to tell the world he has tried his best. When they got home, Ryan pulled into the garage, turned off the engine, and sat there for a moment. I don't want every night to be like this, he said, his voice softer. This was his familiar rhythm. After shifting responsibility onto her, he would soften just enough to make her feel that if she kept talking, she would be the cruel one. I love you, but you have to learn how to let some things go. Emily unbuckled her seatbelt. I have let a lot of things go. He looked at her. Then why are they still here? The question hit her like a trick. Because the things people let go in a marriage do not disappear. They sink, piling up at the bottom, until the whole body of water grows heavy and murky. But she was too tired to explain. She opened the car door and stepped out, leaving Ryan sitting in the darkness of the garage with the face of a man who could not understand why the woman he loved kept making everything so hard. When they first fell in love, Ryan Carter did not seem like the kind of man who would one day use his mother as a weapon and call it helplessness. He met Emily at a mutual friend's birthday party in a small bar in South End, where the yellow lights hung low. The wooden tables were marked with rings from cocktail glasses, and the music was loud enough that people had to lean close when they spoke. Emily was 27 then, working in human resources at an insurance company, freshly out of a bland relationship with a kind but invisible man who always said, whatever you want, until she felt as though she were dating an echo. Ryan was 30, a project manager for a commercial construction firm, with a quick smile, warm blue eyes, broad shoulders, and the kind of self-deprecating humor that made him seem unpretentious. He asked whether her job made her hate people. She said she only hated forms. He laughed loudly, remembered that line all night, and later, when he texted her for the first time, he opened with, "Still fighting forms, or have they surrendered?" Emily had laughed when she read it in the elevator on her way to work, and she remembered the feeling of not having laughed so lightly because of a man in a very long time. Ryan knew how to listen in the beginning with almost perfect precision. He remembered that Emily liked cheesecake, but hated the red strawberry top. He remembered that she had played violin as a child, but quit because she was afraid of performing. He remembered her habit of rubbing her thumb along the rim of her cup when she was anxious. He remembered that her parents had divorced when she was 13, and that ever since, she had been afraid of big fights turning houses into battlefields. He did not rush. He did not pressure. He showed up when he said he would, called when he promised to call, drove her home without trying to come inside before she invited him, opened the car door without making it feel like a performance. That restraint was what made Emily trust him. When he spoke about Patricia, he did not hide everything. Mom can be a lot, he said one afternoon in Freedom Park, as they walked beneath the green trees, children riding bikes around the lake and a few people walking dogs. What does a lot mean? Emily asked. Ryan picked up a small stone and tossed it into the water. She loves by checking everything, calls a lot, asks a lot, has opinions about food, houses, schedules, who I date. He looked at her and smiled a little awkwardly. But don't worry, I'll handle her. That sentence fell into Emily like a small stone placed in her palm, solid and reassuring. He knew the problem. He saw it. He would stand between her and his mother's excess. She did not know then that, when Ryan said he would handle Patricia, he did not mean he would set boundaries with her. He meant he would try to make Emily believe that living without boundaries was reasonable. Patricia was present from the first months of their relationship, in ways Emily tried to explain as normal. She called Ryan almost every night. If he was at Emily's place, His phone would light up on the dinner table with the name Mom, and he would grimace apologetically. Just 1 minute. He would step out onto the balcony or into the hallway, but Patricia's voice sometimes still slipped through the door. She asked whether he had eaten, whether he remembered his meeting the next day, whether he would come over that weekend to help her clear the garage, whether Emily had any plans for Thanksgiving, whether Emily working in HR meant she was always analyzing people. Ryan would usually say, "Mom, stop," in a laughing voice, then come back to Emily, kiss her hair, and say, "She's just curious." Emily told herself she should not be bothered. A man loving his mother was not a bad thing. Patricia was a widow. Her husband had died when Ryan was in college. Maybe Ryan was her emotional anchor. Maybe Emily, who had grown up in a fractured family with little physical affection, simply was not used to this kind of closeness. Maybe the problem was her. Those maybes sounded fair at first. Later, they became chains. At the engagement party, Patricia gave Emily a warning wrapped in a smile. Ryan proposed in Patricia's backyard because she said it was meaningful to the family, even though Emily had once told him she would prefer something private. He knelt beneath the yellow string lights hung between two oak trees. Friends clapped, Patricia cried, and Emily was so moved she temporarily forgot that her proposal had been staged on her future mother-in-law's territory. Later, while everyone ate cake and drank champagne, Emily went into the kitchen for more ice. Patricia followed, closed the freezer door, and stood beside her at the island. "Ryan has always needed someone who understands him," she said, her voice light, as though she were talking about the weather. "I hope you can learn." Emily froze, the bag of ice in her hand. "I hope I'll understand him well, too." Patricia smiled, but her eyes did not. "He's sensitive. He doesn't respond well to pressure. Some women think love is making a man explain himself all the time. That wears him down." Emily did not know how to answer. When she told Ryan about it that night, he pulled her into his arms on the sofa and kissed her temple. "Mom says things weirdly. Don't overthink it. Don't overthink it." That was the first time. The sentence was used to lay a cloth over Emily's intuition. Later, that cloth would grow so thick, she could barely hear her own voice beneath. In the first year of marriage, Patricia began invading their home through helpfulness. Emily and Ryan bought a 3-bedroom house in Matthews, a Charlotte suburb, far enough from the city to be quiet, close enough for work. Emily paid half the down payment from years of saving. Her name was on the mortgage with Ryan's. She chose the living room paint color with him, planted lavender on both sides of the walkway with him, bought an old dining table with him, and spent their first weekend sanding and polishing it. She remembered the feeling of opening the door with her own key for the first time, as though life had finally given her a space that did not belong to the broken family she came from, and had not yet been swallowed by the Carter family. Patricia appeared in the 3rd week after they moved in, unannounced, carrying a basket of muffins, a bag of dish towels, and a box of just a few little things I thought would suit the house. She walked straight into the kitchen, opened the cabinets, and shook her head softly at the way Emily had arranged the dishes. "Sweetheart, Ryan is left-handed, so the mug should go on this side. He won't say it, but he likes it that way." Ryan stood behind Patricia, smiling. "Mom knows my habits better than I do." Emily smiled too, because she did not know what else to do. Patricia moved the mugs, moved the bowls, repositioned the salt and pepper, said the dining room curtains Emily had chosen were a little too sheer, and that the afternoon sun would fade the wooden table, then went into the primary bedroom to place fresh towels on the bed. When Emily followed her, she saw Patricia stripping the sheets Emily had changed that morning. "These are too wrinkled," Patricia said. "A bedroom needs to feel restful. Ryan doesn't sleep well if things aren't tidy." Emily watched another woman change the sheets on her bed and felt something in her chest being pushed out of her own house. That night, after Patricia left, Emily stood in the bedroom and looked at the bed arranged by Ryan's mother. "She went into our bedroom and changed our sheets, Ryan," she said. Ryan was taking off his watch, and he turned toward her with a mildly tired expression. "She's just particular." "That's not particular. That's invasive." He sighed, and that sigh made her feel as if she had already lost before the argument began. "You're using a heavy word, because it feels heavy to me. My mother wanted to help. If I went to your mother's house and changed her sheets, would you call that helping?" Ryan did not answer right away. He set his watch down and came over to her. "I understand you felt uncomfortable. I'll tell her to be more careful, but my mother has lived alone for a long time. She needs to feel like she still has a place in my life." Emily looked at him. "Having a place in your life doesn't mean having authority in our bedroom." Ryan rubbed her shoulder. I know, just don't turn everything into a hard boundary, okay? Family doesn't run on laws. Emily did not know then that a family without laws usually only had the law of the strongest person. And in the Carter household, the strongest person was always Patricia, unless Ryan needed to borrow that strength to avoid confronting his wife. Private stories began leaking like water through cracks beneath the floor. At first, Emily thought it was coincidence. Patricia called after one evening when Emily and Ryan had talked about money, telling her that young women worry too much about loans, but a wife should give her husband some room to lead. Patricia came over after a weekend when Ryan had gone golfing and Emily had been hurt, bringing banana bread and saying, "Ryan works so hard. He needs an outlet. Don't make him feel guilty for breathing." Patricia asked about children right after Emily told Ryan she did not want to get pregnant in the coming year because work was changing. "If you wait until everything is perfect, you'll wait forever," Patricia said over lunch in front of two of Ryan's aunts. "I'm not pressuring you. I'm only saying men have dreams about family too." Emily looked at Ryan. He said nothing. When they got home, she asked, "You told your mother about the children conversation?" Ryan took off his shoes by the door without looking at her. "I only said we were talking about it. I thought that was private. I needed advice. From the person who would use it to pressure me." He turned back, irritation visible on his face. "You always think my mother has some agenda, because she always knows where to press." Ryan said she was too sensitive. She said he was too loose with his mother. He said he was trapped. She said he kept putting his mother in the middle. The argument ended the way many of them did. Not with resolution, but with her exhaustion and his wounded expression. That night, Ryan slept facing away from her. The next morning, Patricia texted Emily, "Hope you and Ryan are better today. Marriage takes humility." Emily looked at the message in her company parking lot and felt, for the first time, that she was not only being watched, she was being reported. During holidays, Patricia controlled through schedules, food, and guilt. Thanksgiving at the Carter house was not an invitation. It was an obligation wrapped in the sentence, "I'm making the stuffing Ryan's father loved. It would be sad if you two weren't here." Christmas morning had to be at Patricia's because Ryan had never opened presents anywhere else. If Emily wanted to visit her own mother, Patricia would say, "Of course, honey, your mother should see you too," and then call Ryan later in a trembling voice about how alone she was. Ryan would come home and say, "Mom didn't say anything, but I know she's sad." Emily would answer, "My mother is sad too." Ryan would sigh. Why does everything have to be measured? The question was always strange, because the Carter family had been measuring everything from the beginning. It was just that the scale had always been pre-weighted in their favor. One year, Emily decided to invite both sides to her and Ryan's house, hoping that if she hosted in her own space, she would not be treated like a guest. Tricia arrived 2 hours early, bringing 3 dishes even though Emily had prepared everything, adjusting the oven, moving the plates, saying, "I'm only helping." And when Emily's mother arrived and complimented the dinner, Patricia smiled and said, "Emily did most of it. I just made sure Ryan had the dishes he grew up with." Emily's mother looked at her daughter and saw the wound in that sentence immediately, but because she did not want to ruin dinner, she said nothing. That night, after everyone left, Emily stood washing dishes until nearly midnight. Ryan wiped the table and said, "I thought today went pretty well." Emily laughed, the sound so thin he stopped moving. "Well, for whom? Are you going to start again?" "No, I think it started before your mother ever walked into the kitchen." Ryan threw the dish towel down. "I can't win with you." Emily looked at the hot water running over her hands, reddening her skin. "I never asked you to win. I asked you to join the right team." Ryan became increasingly skilled at playing the man stretched between two sides. He did not speak badly of Emily in front of her, at least not in any way easy to catch. He only looked tired, rubbed his face, stayed silent for too long, said, "I don't want to come home and feel like I'm walking into a hearing." Said, "My mother is getting older. You can't keep winning every argument." Said, "I miss when we were fun." As if their joy had died because Emily refused to let things go, not because he had let ever. Ithing stab her again and again. In front of relatives, Ryan became the decent man, a little sad, still holding his wife's hand but with distant eyes. Patricia looked at him with public tenderness. She asked whether he was sleeping enough, whether he was eating, whether work was stressful. If Emily sat beside him, Patricia would place a hand on her shoulder and say, "Take care of him, sweetheart. He gives so much." Emily wanted to scream, gives to whom and what had she given? But a woman who screamed in her mother-in-law's living room would not be remembered, as the one who finally told the truth. She would be remembered as the one who lost control. Patricia knew that. Ryan knew that too. Emily began to wonder whether her own calm was killing her more slowly. Ryan's 37th birthday became the major fracture. Patricia hosted an extended family party, inviting Ryan's former co-workers, college friends, and neighbors. On the television in the living room, a slideshow of Ryan from childhood to adulthood played on repeat. Patricia stood beside the screen and occasionally added stories. Ryan was always the child who wanted everyone to be happy. Ryan never liked disappointing anyone. Ryan has such a tender heart. Emily listened to each sentence and realized they were both praise and the foundation for the accusation to come. When Patricia raised her glass, she spoke about Ryan being the light of her life, about him being like his father in devotion but unlike him in sensitivity. And then her eyes moistened. "I just want my son to be happy again." The room went quiet. No one said Emily's name, but no one needed to. Happy again, meaning someone had taken his happiness. Ryan looked down at the cake, his lips pressed together, and did not correct her. Emily watched him. In that moment, she saw clearly how much he liked being pitied. Not in an obvious, deliberate way, but there was a lightness in his shoulders when the room placed him in the role of the suffering man. He did not need to say Emily hurt him. His mother had said it for him, with a sentence vague enough that no one could object. That was the Carter art. Letting people understand the most poisonous thing without anyone having to take responsibility for saying it plainly. After the party, Lauren, Ryan's cousin, pulled Emily out onto the porch. October wind moved through the backyard and made the string lights tremble. Lauren held a glass of wine and looked uneasy. "I don't want to get involved, but Ryan said things at home have been hard because of you." Emily looked at her and felt something inside her sink. "Because of me?" Lauren rushed to soften it. "Not that he blamed you, just that he said you get tense with Patricia, and then he has to stand in the middle. He said sometimes he feels like he can't breathe in his own house." Emily nodded, not because she agreed, but because if she did not nod, she was afraid she would break right there. When she went back inside, she saw Ryan laughing with a group of old friends, Patricia behind him with a look of proud sadness. Emily suddenly realized she was not merely dealing with a difficult mother-in-law. She was living inside a story about herself that had been told in rooms where she was not present. Every time she entered, everyone had already heard the previous chapter from Ryan's mouth, edited by Patricia's tears. That night, Emily locked the bathroom door and sat down on the cold floor. She did not cry immediately. She opened her phone and created a new note. She named it "Things That Happened." The first line she wrote slowly, her fingers trembling slightly. "Patricia said I wasn't raised to understand family." Ryan heard this. The second line, "Ryan said I let her affect me." The third, "Patricia said Ryan should be happy again at his birthday." Ryan heard this and did not correct it. She stopped and looked at the 3 lines, feeling ashamed that she had to do this. A wife having to document her own marriage like evidence from a crime scene meant something had broken very deeply. But she also felt a small steadiness. On the page, the story could not be blurred by Ryan's sigh. It could not be softened by Patricia's smile. It could not be distorted by relatives looking at her with pity. She began writing more. Everything Patricia said, every reaction from Ryan, every time something private between them appeared in his mother's mouth. Every time Ryan said she was difficult, and after almost every incident she wrote the same sentence almost unconsciously. Ryan heard this. Ryan told her this. Ryan did not stop this. At first, the note was where she checked whether she was going crazy. Later, it became the place where she understood she had been trying to stay sane inside a system designed to make her doubt herself. Ryan's old phone should not have still been signed in. It was in the study drawer on a sunny Saturday afternoon, when Emily was clearing out a cabinet to find their home insurance paper. Ryan had promised to go with her to choose new dining chairs, but Patricia had called to say her sink was draining slowly, and Ryan said, "I'll just stop by for an hour." 1 hour became 3. Emily cleaned the cabinet so she would not keep watching the clock. She found the old iPhone beneath a pile of charging cords and power banks, its screen cracked by a fine line. She meant to put it in the old electronics bag, but when she plugged it in to see whether the data needed to be wiped, the screen lit up. No lock. Or rather, it still used Ryan's old code, the one he used for everything even though she had told him to change it many times. A message appeared. The latest line from Patricia sat right on the screen. "Did she apologize yet, or is she still punishing you?" Emily stood still in the study, the sound of the air conditioner above her suddenly distant. She knew she was standing at a boundary. If she opened it, she would see something she might never be able to forget. If she did not, she would continue living in the fog other people kept blowing into her face. She opened it. The messages stretched back for years, the years when she had thought Ryan was merely helpless before his mother. He had actually been writing Patricia steady reports that made Emily look impossible to live with. After Emily was hurt because he had gone golfing 3 weekends in a row despite promising to save Sundays for her, Ryan wrote, "She's upset again. I feel like I can't have one thing for myself." He did not mention that one thing had taken 3 consecutive weekends. Patricia answered, "You need space. A good wife understands that." After Emily said she did not want children yet, Ryan wrote, "She says work is too busy. I'm trying not to pressure her, but it feels like I'm always waiting for her to be ready for the life we talked about." He did not mention that he himself had said they should wait until their finances were more stable. Patricia answered, "Some women don't understand that men grieve delayed dreams too." After the forgotten anniversary, Ryan wrote, "She cried about the anniversary. I had a client dinner. I can't keep proving love through calendar dates." He did not mention that he had promised to make a reservation, that Emily had sat at the table in a blue dress waiting until 9. Patricia answered, "Poor baby. She makes you work so hard emotionally." Emily scrolled and scrolled, watching each year of her marriage appear like a room behind a mirror. The messages were not just complaints. They were another version of her life, where every pain of hers became a demand, every boundary became control, every question became pressure. And Patricia did not merely receive that version. She fed it. "Do you want me to say something to her?" she asked after one argument. Ryan replied, "Maybe she'll listen if it comes from you." Emily set the phone down on the desk, her whole body cold. Patricia was the one attacking, but Ryan was the one giving her the address. That evening, when Ryan came home with the casserole Patricia had sent, Emily placed the old phone on the kitchen table. The yellow light fell across the cracked glass. Ryan looked at it and his face changed color. "You went through my things?" he asked. Not "What did you see?" Not "I'm sorry." His first reflex was to move the blame. Emily felt pain but not surprise. "That's where you want to start? Those are private messages. You turned me into the villain in your mother's eyes and then made me endure her, and what upsets you is that I found out." Ryan set the casserole down too hard. "I needed to talk to someone?" "No, Ryan. You needed someone to hit me for you, then you came back and played the trapped husband." His face reddened. "You're crazy." The word passed over her like an old knife, but it did not cut as deeply as before. "No, I'm just reading." She opened a screenshot. "Maybe she'll listen if it comes from you. Remember that? What happened after? You let your mother call me about golf. You let her say I was suffocating you. You stood in the kitchen while I cried and said she was only worried." Ryan braced his hands on the table and leaned toward her. "You don't understand how desperate I was. Desperate to speak directly to your wife. Desperate because you turn everything into a trial. I can't say one thing without being analyzed. So you made your mother the judge." He looked at her, his eyes red and wet, but his voice hard. "Maybe if you were easier, I wouldn't need to talk to her." The sentence lay between them like something that had finally removed its own mask. Emily felt a very small sound inside herself, like a string snapping. Not because it was the cruelest thing he had said, because it was the clearest. He had not been completely controlled by his mother. He had chosen his mother as a tool when Emily was not easy enough for him to manage alone. Emily did not sleep that night. Ryan went to the guest room and slammed the door, then later texted her a long message saying he felt betrayed because his privacy had been violated. She did not answer. She sat in the study, took screenshots, and sent them to her private email, not because she had a clear legal plan yet, but because some part of her knew Ryan would try to deny, soften, and reverse the truth. The next morning, she arranged to meet Patricia. Patricia agreed to meet at a cafe near her church, where she likely knew enough people if she needed to preserve her image. Emily arrived first, chose a corner table, and brought a paper folder. She felt strangely calm, not the calm of being healed, but the calm of someone whose fever had passed and left only coldness. Patricia walked in on time, wearing a camel coat, her hair neatly styled, a brown leather handbag in hand, pale pink lipstick. She sat down without ordering coffee. "Emily," she said, "I hope this isn't another attempt to make me the villain." Emily opened the folder. "No, today I don't need to make you anything. I just want you to read." Patricia looked at the printed messages, her expression first faintly disdainful, then defensive, then irritated. "You read Ryan's private messages. Ryan turned my marriage into private material for the two of you for years. Privacy isn't intact here anymore. Patricia pressed her lips together. He needed me. You don't understand the pressure he's under. Emily slid another page forward. Do you know what he told me about you? That you don't mean harm, that you're just lonely, that you're too emotional to understand boundary, that I needed to be understanding because you're his mother. Patricia read more slowly. Emily continued. To you, he said I was cold, controlling, didn't understand family. To me, he said you were only worried, only spoke a little harshly, only needed to be indulged. He made sure both of us saw the other woman as the problem, so he never had to become the problem. Patricia was silent for a long time. Cafe still hummed softly around them. The sound of the coffee grinder, the door opening, people calling out drink names. But their table felt as though it had been placed beneath a glass bell. Finally, Patricia said, he told me you were pushing him away from us. He told me you were too fragile to hear no. Patricia looked up. Insult flashed in her eyes, then something else, something more uncomfortable. Recognition. That sounds like his father, she said softly. Emily did not ask. But Patricia looked down at her hands and began to tell the story, not like someone confessing, but like someone pulling an old moldy object from the bottom of a closet. Daniel Carter, Ryan's father, had been dead for years and was spoken of in the Carter family as a good, quiet, hardworking man. But Patricia told another version. Daniel did not shout. He did not forbid. He let everyone fight around him. If his mother criticized Patricia, Daniel would say, "That's just how Mom is." Then complained to his mother behind Patricia's back that Patricia was too sensitive. If Patricia wanted him to make a financial decision, he would say she was better at it. Then when the investment failed, he claimed he had never been fully informed. If Patricia was angry, he sat silently, with sad eyes, until she looked cruel for arguing with a wall. He made helplessness feel holy, Patricia said, and the sentence sent a chill through Emily. Ryan had learned not only weakness, he had learned to turn helplessness into virtue, to let the women around him hold the weapons while he stood in the middle with clean hands. That understanding did not redeem Patricia in Emily's eyes. It only made the picture more complicated, more painful. Emily looked at the woman who had hurt her with hundreds of small sentences, with invasions, with accepting Ryan's distorted version and decorating it with maternal devotion. You didn't know everything, Emily said, but you knew enough to be kinder. Patricia looked at her, and for once did not immediately argue. She asked, "What are you going to do?" Emily gathered the papers and stacked them neatly. "The thing neither of us has done. Stop protecting him from consequences." Patricia did not promise to apologize. She did not hug her. There was no warm scene of reconciliation. They left the cafe like two women who had both seen a hole beneath the house, but still had not become friends. Patricia stood beside her car and said very softly, "I did hurt you." Emily looked at her. Yes, Patricia seemed to wait, perhaps for a but. Emily did not give her one. Some truths do not need to be wrapped again, so the person who caused them can swallow them more easily. The next family dinner unfolded like an experiment Ryan did not know he was part of. Patricia invited them, her voice on the phone different, less sugary, less directive. Emily agreed to go, not because she wanted to save anything, but because she needed to see how the system behaved when one gear stopped turning. Ryan was tense from the moment they got into the car. "My mother sounded strange," he said. Emily looked outside. "Maybe she's tired. What did you say to her yesterday?" "The truth," he turned sharply. "Emily, you don't like that word anymore?" He did not answer. At Patricia's house, the table was still beautiful, the food still abundant, but Patricia did not attack. When Emily placed the salad on the table, Patricia said thank you and left it alone. She did not comment on how the vegetables were cut. She did not ask whether there was too little dressing. She did not say Ryan preferred it another way. Ryan watched as though he were hearing a familiar song, missing its usual beat. Halfway through dinner, he tried to activate the old pattern. "Mom, didn't you have something to say about Thanksgiving?" Patricia was cutting her meat and stopped. She did not look at Emily. She looked at Ryan. "No, I think you should speak to your wife yourself." The room froze. Ryan gave an uneasy laugh. "What?" Patricia wiped her mouth with her napkin. "If you have an issue with the Thanksgiving plans, you should speak to Emily." "I'm not your spokesperson." Emily looked at Ryan. For the first time, he no longer had his mother as a shield, his wife as his mother's opponent, or the familiar stage on which to side. He looked around the table, smiling lightly but with panic in his eyes. "Okay, that's new." Patricia did not smile, and the fact that she did not smile exposed Ryan more than any accusation could have. When the two women stopped playing their roles, he no longer knew his next line. That night when they got home, Ryan exploded. He threw his keys onto the tray by the door, The metal sounds sharp. What did you say to my mother? Emily took off her coat and hung it on the hook. The truth, you manipulated her. You hate the feeling of being talked about behind your back, don't you? Don't do that with me. Do what? Bring someone else into private matters, and then get angry when they don't perform the way you want anymore. Ryan stepped into the living room, his face red. A true anger Emily rarely saw because he usually hid it beneath exhaustion. You turned my mother against me. No, I just stopped letting you turn us against each other. He laughed dryly. You think she's on your side. She'll always be my mother. I don't need a side. I need the truth. The truth is you make everything hard. You don't know how to let things go. You don't know how to let family be family. You made me look for someone who understood me because you always accused me. Emily stood in the middle of the living room, where their wedding photo sat on the shelf, where she had chosen the curtains, where she had decorated Christmas trees, where she had once believed no one had the right to make her an outsider. She spoke very slowly. Your mother didn't break this marriage. Ryan went silent, as though the sentence had made the floor drop beneath him. She heard it, but you were the one who let it bleed. He stared at her, his eyes tight. There was no answer, because she had stepped out of the old trap. She was not saying Patricia was cruel so he could respond. That's my mother. She was not saying she was innocent so he could say she was playing victim. She was only putting responsibility where it belonged. Ryan tried the final blow. The sentence he knew might keep her there because it struck her deepest fear. If you leave, you'll prove my mother was right about you. A year earlier, that sentence might have destroyed Emily. She would have imagined Patricia telling the relatives, I always knew she would leave when family got hard. She would have imagined Lauren, Helen, Ryan's aunts looking at one another with that poor Ryan expression. She would have stayed a little longer to prove she was not a quitter, not a cold daughter-in-law, not the wife who destroyed the family. But now she had seen the messages. She knew that if she stayed, Ryan would still write a story in which she made him suffer. If she left, he would write one too. She could not win inside his story. She could only stop living in it. Maybe she'll think that, Emily said. Maybe you'll let her think that, but I no longer need a version of myself approved by your family to know what happened. She went upstairs. Ryan called her name, and for the first time there was real fear in his voice. She did not stop. In the bedroom, she pulled a suitcase from the closet. The wheels hit the hardwood floor with a small but final sound. She packed without order: sweaters, jeans, underwear, papers, laptop, phone, charger. Her hands trembled but kept moving. Ryan stood in the doorway, pale-faced. You're overreacting. No, I'm reacting late. We can talk. We've been talking for 9 years. You just kept handing every conversation to your mother for editing. He stepped back as though struck. You're really leaving because of a few messages? Emily turned to look at him. No, I'm leaving because a few messages finally showed me the marriage I'd been living in. The next morning, Patricia came because Ryan had called her, of course. He still believed in the old ritual. His mother arrives, Emily feels pressure, he stands in the middle, and things get pushed back into a version that can be endured. Emily was pulling her suitcase down the stairs when the doorbell rang. Ryan opened the door and Patricia stood outside, her coat thrown on hastily, less makeup than usual on her face, her hair not entirely neat. She looked at the suitcase, then at Emily, and in her eyes there was panic, not of a mother-in-law afraid of losing control, but of a person realizing the machine she had helped feed had crushed more than she had wanted to see. Emily eyes. I didn't know he was telling you something different. Emily set the suitcase down at the foot of the stairs. She looked at Patricia, the woman who had said she did not understand family, who had adjusted her kitchen, who had cut her with advice, who had accepted Ryan's distorted stories and used them as evidence. You didn't need to know to be kind. Patricia was silent. That sentence aged her further. Ryan stood beside his mother, his voice tense. Tell her she's making a mistake. Patricia looked at her son. Emily saw an entire history pass over Patricia's face, from Daniel Carter sitting silently while women fought around him, to Ryan standing before her now, asking her once again to do the dirty emotional work for him. Ryan repeated sharper this time. Mom, Patricia swallowed. Maybe you should have stood somewhere sooner. Ryan looked at her as though she had betrayed him. Emily did not wait any longer. She pulled her suitcase through the door. In the car, she sat for a long time before starting the engine. The house she and Ryan had shared stood before her, blue front door, lavender bushes on either side of the path, living room curtains she had chosen after 3 stores, kitchen window where she had once stood washing dishes and trying not to cry. She took off her wedding ring. No throwing, no rage. She simply twisted it from her finger, felt the pale indentation on her skin, and placed it in the small pocket inside her purse. Through the house window, she saw Ryan turn toward Patricia, his mouth moving quickly, his hand lifting as if accusing her. Patricia stood still. Emily could not hear, but she did not need to. Ryan was doing to his mother what he had once done to her, turning himself into the one who had been abandoned, the one no one understood, the one betrayed by the insufficient devotion of the women around him. Cold irony of it did not make Emily feel happy. It only confirmed that she had left a circle, not an incident. The months that followed did not bring beautiful healing. Emily's new apartment was on the second floor of a small building south of Charlotte. Not large, with no yard, no spacious kitchen, no dining room big enough for the family she had once tried to belong to. The living room window looked out over a parking lot and a row of crepe myrtles. She bought a gray sofa, a small wooden table, 2 cheap lamps, and a few hardy plants. On the first night, she slept on a mattress on the floor, listening to the unfamiliar refrigerator, the footsteps of the upstairs neighbor, and cried without making a sound because the quiet did not feel like freedom the way she had imagined. Sometimes freedom is only the absence of the voice that hurts you, while the body still waits for the old blow. Some mornings, when her phone vibrated, she flinched, her heart pounding before she saw it was only a work message. Once, when a coworker mentioned her mother-in-law, Emily had to go into the restroom and stand there breathing. Some nights she missed Ryan, not the Ryan from the messages, but Ryan from the South End bar, Ryan who remembered she hated strawberry topping, Ryan who drove the long way around in the rain because she was afraid, Ryan who once said, "I'll handle her," in a voice that made her believe she would be protected. The most painful truth was not that Ryan had never loved her. Maybe he had loved her, but he loved her in a way that still allowed her to be hurt if protecting her cost him his victim role, his mother's pity, or the feeling that he was a good man enduring hardship. A love that requires one person to suffer so the other can remain innocent is not a place to live. Patricia sent a letter after 3 months. The envelope was handwritten, the script elegant and slightly slanted. Emily left it on the table for 2 days before opening it. In the letter, Patricia apologized for some of the ways I made you feel unwelcome, a sentence that still kept some distance, that still did not fully say, "I made you unwelcome." But near the end, she wrote, "I thought protecting my son meant believing his pain first. I did not ask enough about yours." Emily read that sentence many times. It did not fix 9 years. It did not erase the dinners. It did not make the old house less cold, but it placed one small stone on the truth Emily had not imagined. She folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. She did not answer, not because she wanted to punish Patricia, but because she did not want to turn every wound into another relationship that needed tending. Some people can understand that they did wrong and still not be entitled to step back into the life of the person they hurt. Ryan texted 2 days later, "We could fix this if my mother stayed out of it." Emily stood in the small kitchen of her apartment, holding a cup of tea, afternoon light falling through the thin curtains. She read the message, and the pain in her chest was no longer sharp the way it used to be, only heavy, cold. He still did not understand, or he did not want to understand. In Ryan's story, the problem was still Patricia, still another woman, still some circumstance outside himself. If his mother stayed out of it, they could fix things. But his mother had never had a key on her own. Ryan had given it to her. Ryan had opened the door. Ryan had shown the way in. Emily placed the phone face down. She did not reply. Not replying did not make her feel strong. It made her feel tired but cleaner. Emily's mother-in-law could not have broken that marriage by herself. Patricia only had the power Ryan gave her. And every time Emily was cut by a careless sentence, every time Patricia knew private things, every time a family dinner became a place where Emily was placed beneath the light, Ryan had been nearby, hearing, knowing, and choosing his own ease over his wife's safety. Patricia hurt the marriage. Ryan let it bleed. Emily had fought for years to earn a seat at the Carter table, had tried to prove she was not an outsider, not a difficult wife, not the woman who stole Patricia's son, not the reason Ryan was not as happy as he used to be. In the end, she understood that the table had never been set for her. It had been staged as a place where Ryan could sit between 2 women, receive pity from his mother, receive guilt from his wife, and call his cowardice being trapped. Emily survived, but she did not return to who she had been before. She no longer trusted a man simply because he said he would handle things if every time he handled them. It meant telling her to be understand. She no longer saw silence as kindness. She no longer mistook a man, not yelling for a man who caused no harm. On nights when the apartment was so quiet she could hear the refrigerator switch on and off, she sometimes still felt pain. A pain with no witnesses, no radiant justice, no scene where the entire Carter family admitted they had been wrong. Ryan might still tell relatives that Emily left because she could not handle Patricia. Patricia might still tell friends that everything was complicated. Lauren might still believe Ryan tried his best. Emily could no longer control the stories they told. She could only keep the truth from being edited inside herself. And that truth did not make her light. It only helped her stand in a colder, quieter room, where no one called poison love, and then asked her to eat at the same table with. His mother couldn't break the marriage by herself. She only had the power he gave her. And when Emily finally saw that, she stopped fighting for a seat at their table. She left them both sitting there, surrounded by every poisonous thing they had mistaken for love.